Esta conferencia comenzará a grabarse.
And I think that we will start. You know that we like to be quite precise in the timing. Okay, so welcome everybody to this new period after summer, and I am really excited to present today the new agenda for September, and we are glad to have with us Ula to start with it. Okay, so today we will have 3 speakers. Sorry, let me present. Yeah, 3 speakers. The theme for today, the subject is fostering the European recovery through industrial clusters. It's mostly the topic for all this month of September, but I will let Ula introduce it to you. Thank you, Ula. Your turn. No, now we cannot hear you. You need to. Yes.
Sorry, not used enough. Can you share the slides I had sent you, Antonio?
Let me check my email.
I hope it went through. I sent it quite late last night.
No, I don't. Sorry. Yes. You're right.
Okay, but I start speaking because the slides that say nothing particularly new anyway on the slides. But what we want to discuss, and I think as Antonio also said, now as we are back, our main goal, our main thinking should be on how we can help to foster the European recovery, and how we can, of course, do this through industrial clusters. And that's why we want to look at what are the different recovery plans, what are the different mechanisms which will be put in place. And one part of this are, of course, the smart specialization strategies. So what we really want during this month, because I think it's really a crucial month, because the member states are working on their recovery plans, and we have to think together and also inspire each other on how can we place clusters in the different parts of the recovery plans and the different instruments. It is not, I think, about that we create something artificial for clusters, but we know that the clusters have to reach out to the SMEs, to the different parts of the ecosystem, and that's why we consider it to be so important. And of course, we are basing ourselves in the next slide of what has been done in the past, because of course clusters is not a new concept, and fostering cooperation amongst industry cluster was something which not only us on European level but also on member state level, this was done. So via our ECCP, our European Cluster Collaboration Platform, which we are ramping up and which will go live on the 7th of September. So also there, we do our utmost to make tools available for you that we can help to foster cluster cooperation. And of course, by now we are doing this via different kind of cluster partnerships, via different kind of meetings. And also there, I think it is part of what we should reflect together in the new reality. How can we help to foster even more and stronger partnerships and cooperation, because the way we are doing this has of course changed dramatically during the pandemic. So in the next slide, we now see, because we talk not only about clusters, we talk about the ecosystems. And for the recovery, there you might remember that we have this 14 ecosystems which were identified, but we should also look at who is part of an ecosystem, and how can clusters be bridge builders, not only between their cluster members, but also between other parts of the ecosystem. And here again, so ecosystem consists, of course, of large companies, the SMEs, the service providers to suppliers, the public authorities, the academia and research community. And the stronger we can connect with them, the more we can help, on one hand, to identify the needs and the opportunities. And one part, of course, there is also the last form, which is the research community. And I think also there we should see whether we can do additional efforts to have a reach out with the academia and research community to be able to use what they are doing, to be able to create a beneficial relation. And although this is one of the reasons why by the end of this week we will have a session during what is called European Science Open Forum, ESOF, where European scientists are gathering. It happens this year in Trieste, and it's a hybrid meeting. And on Saturday morning, with the clusters and Antonio presenting ECA and Bianca Muntian, our cluster manager of the year, and Athanasius from the research side, and Theodora moderating this session, and myself, we will talk to the scientific community, explaining what clusters are about, and also looking how can we engage more scientists to work with clusters, and also to point out what are the opportunities for scientists to work in clusters. So I think this is another important aspect in the recovery, which we should then tackle. In the next slide, please. This is just to repeat, that was, you have seen this quite a lot of times before the summer break. These are the 14 industrial ecosystems which we are the most hit by the crisis. And you see here all the different kind of figures, which were the first estimates where we were looking at to see how they are affected. On one hand, in number of the size of the ecosystem via companies, via employees. And I will not go in detail with these different ecosystems, but it's just a reminder that also during the month of September, here in this morning meetings, we will look into these ecosystems also one by one, because it is important that we can see what role the clusters can play in these ecosystems. And that's why also from our side, we are bringing our Commission colleagues who are working on these ecosystems to discuss with you in this forum. In the next slide, please. Here, this is also just as a reminder, the dimensions of the budget, which have before summer been agreed by the European Council, which still need to pass a decision with the European Parliament. And so on one hand, there is the so-called multi-annual financial framework, the 7 years EU's budget, which got smaller. But what is now in particular for the recovery is this 750 billion, which is called Next Generation EU, where it is split in 390 billion of grants and 360 billion of loans. So this is, let's say, also this money which we are talking about and thinking about how we can assess it. So in the next slide, there is a breakdown how this can look like, and how the different investments can be done. And for example, as we see area, of course, where a lot of budget is going for are the structural funds. And that's why we want to look more at the smart specialization strategies. And starting next week is smart specialization week even, to really, because it is important that the clusters understand the opportunities. And because the smart specialization strategies have also this ecosystem thinking intrinsic in what they have done already in the past, and that's why looking at the different of research and innovation of the digitalization, but also the skills development and entrepreneurship, and of course the growth and competitiveness of SMEs are a big part of it. Then in the next slide, next click again. This is yeah, so this is just a split of the next generation EU. I have mentioned this already. So 390 and 360 billion. We can go to the next slide. This is just a slide to say what we are planning with our, let's say, what you know also from the past former COSME budget, which is, let's say, where we really target for European clusters, where we want to, and now it is the Euro clusters, which are the joint cluster initiatives, and they should also be there to focus for the European recovery, taking into account the 14 industrial ecosystems, but to help the transformation for resilient, green, and digital. And the importance is that this is one means, but let's be honest, this is a tiny means compared to the recovery budget, because this will come out of the normal MFF, and I have said this has got smaller. And that's why also during this week, we need to think how can clusters assess also different kind of budget sources. And that's why it's here mentioned component 5, which is part of the structural funds, and the different kind of recovery money, and that this kind of discussion we should really together have this week, and also with different colleagues, so that you understand the different mechanism and you can think and judge whether this could be useful for your cluster. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to sum up, the important thing is that clusters can bridge actors. That also means clusters, you can bring different actors, and with these different actors, you can come up with innovative proposals. And that's why also we need this a bit thinking out of the box. So do please not only think what do we need as investing in the COSME part, because this is far too limited. So therefore, please think further, and that's why also when we look at the value chains and the ecosystem, how can we come up with other solutions, and how can we find way for financing them? And then in the next slide, this is just to highlight again the importance for skills. In the beginning of July, the European Pact for Skills, the European Skills Agenda was published, and the Pact for Skills is a major part of this flagship of this skills agenda. And with a Pact for Skills, we really want to see the role of clusters helping to and upskill, because we know that the effect of the crisis will be layoffs. And so much we can anticipate by a and upskilling and helping, and also maybe within a cluster, what are possibilities for and upskilling. This is something very important, and we will dedicate also a lot of work onto this. And then, of course, we are working towards, because we have the expert group, the cluster expert group, and also with this expert group, we want to think with the member states what can be done and how can we use it for the recovery plans. So just here to remember, so today we are starting off again the sessions, but we are also having webinars with the expert group. In October, there is a start of the submission of the national recovery plans. We will discuss this then also in the cluster conference in November in Berlin. And in December, we will submit a final paper from the expert group with recommendations. And in the next slide, this is just a reminder, and then the save the date. 10th to 11th of November in a hybrid format, we will do the cluster conference, and I hope that you will all be participating and discussing actively with us during this conference. Thank you very much.
You are very welcome, Ulla. Thank you to you. And we will come back to you for sure in some minutes. Now is the turn of Antonio Montañez. Antonio was with us, I think, in April.
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, hello. Antonio
Thank you
is... sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Antonio is chair of econometrics in the University of Zaragoza, and the idea to invite him is to let him present us the economic situation that at the end is the framework of our activities. So thank you very much, Antonio, for joining us. And I will give you now the presentation rights. Yes. Yeah. So now you should be able to present.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Antonio, for inviting me to this session of the European Cluster Alliance. As you have mentioned, the idea of this presentation is to offer you a view of the evolution of the European economy, especially focus on the estimation of the behavior on the third quarter in 2020. Okay. To that end, I have employed some of the data provided by Eurostat. Okay, and particularly I have employed the business surveys of the Eurostat, who provide us information up to August of 2020. Okay, so most of the data we can employ are to this month and also to the second quarter 2020. Okay, but please be good with me with this estimation, because the data are based on this survey, and this survey is not based on real data, just on the opinions of the experts. So, but this is the best I can use today. Okay, so please let me tell you that the short-term statistics system of Eurostat is based on a set of different confidence sentiment indicators. A confidence indicator is just a statistical indicator which resumes the information of the experts when they are interrogating and replying some questions about the possibility of the economic growth in the next month. Okay, Eurostat produced 5 separate confidence indicators: industry, construction services, retail trade, and consumers. And from these confidence indicators, Eurostat elaborates another one, which is it's called a sentiment indicator. Difference between confidence and sentiment indicator is pretty small. It depends on the degree of elaboration. Okay. The confidence indicator is just based on the simple arithmetic average of the balance of positive and negative answers to specific questions of the survey. And from this confidence indicator, Eurostat elaborates the above-mentioned sentiment indicator. Okay, the interpretation of the confidence indicator is easy. The higher the value, the more probably the economy grows, according to the view of the experts. Okay, the base, the elaboration of the economic sentiment indicator is as follows. It depends on the confidence indicators, and you have there the debate of each of these indicators. Okay, both the economic sentiment and the confidence indicator is published monthly by the European Commission. We dispose the data up to August of 2020. Okay, once we have these indicators, we should know that the evolution of this indicator is closely related to the gross domestic product. So we can employ them to predict the evolution of the GDP. Okay, but this is not the best. The best way to predict the evolution of this macro magnitude. I would rather prefer to employ real data. For instance, I prefer the use of indicators such as industrial production or retail sales. Okay, but we don't have this data, so in this moment we can employ only this confidence sentiment indicator. So, having said that, I'm going to present you first the evolution of these indicators. Not all of them, just three. Then the sentiment indicator, and later I will present you my estimation to the third quarter of 2020. Okay, so this is the industrial confidence indicator. Okay, you have there the evolution for 2017 up to August of 2020. As you can see in black, the thicker solid line is the evolution of the European Union, the 27, European Union 27. Okay, as you can observe, there is a very sharp fall in April of this year due to the problems of the pandemic, And then there is a recovery, a very sharp recovery, but this recovery does not achieve the levels previous to the pandemic. Okay, at the end, in August of 2020, the level of all the indicator for all the countries. You have there the evolution of Germany, Spain, France, Italy, and Netherlands. It's quite similar, but the behavior of Italy is a little poorer than the rest. Okay, so there is a recovery similar to this to all these countries. Probably the recovery of Italy is a little poor. Okay, the behavior of the service indicator is quite similar. Okay, again the evolution of the UE27 is here, fall in April, recovery, but this recovery is very far away to the levels previous of the pandemic. The behavior of Germany is always better than the behavior of the global European economy. There is a recovery for most of the countries, but you can see here the evolution of Spain. The initial recovery is similar to the rest of the countries, but the perspective in July of 2020 have changed, and in August, the behavior of August exhibits a fall with respect to the previous month, probably reflecting the bad behavior of the tourism sector. Okay, so the perspective in Spain are currently worse than the ones in July. Similarly, the consumer confidence indicator reflects something very similar. Okay, fall in April, our recovery up to June, and after this period, the expert's opinion is that the behavior of this confidence is going to remain stable around this value. Okay, even worse, in Spain, the perspectives are negative, in the sense that the behavior, the opinions expert is that the behavior of the Spanish economy will be worse in August than the one in June. Okay, so, but again, probably reflecting the fact that the tourism sector is, the behavior of the tourism sector is not good. Okay, so if we resume the behavior of all these confidence indicators plus the one of the construction sector and the retail trade sector, we can, well, Eurostat produce the sentiment indicators. The value 100 here is the value of the long-term growth. So values above 100 implies that the economy is going to grow better than the long-term growth. Okay. By contrast, the values lower than 100 implies a negative behavior of the economy. Okay. The black solid line again is the evolution of the European Union 27, and we can observe that most of the countries at the end of the sample in August of 2020 are around this value of the European Union. The highest value is the one of Germany, followed by France and Netherlands. Italy exhibits a value lower than the rest of the economies, and again, the behavior of Spain is twofold. On the one hand, we can observe a sharp increase up to July of 2020, but the perspectives after this period are negative again. Okay, so probably the behavior of Spain and Italy will be worse than the rest of the countries. This sentiment indicator is also available for some other countries. Here you have the evolution of Austria, Poland, Sweden, Belgium, Denmark, and Ireland. The behavior of the Sweden economy and the Austrian economy is quite similar to the evolution of the rest of the European economies. By contrast, Belgium, Denmark, and Poland especially exhibit a worse behavior when we compare with the evolution of the rest of the economies. Okay, these are the values we have. Okay, and we have the evolution on the estimation of the GDP for up to the second quarter of 2020. With this data, we can try to approximate to the evolution of the GDP for the third quarter 2020, okay, employing these sentiment indicators. Okay, and these are the values I have estimated. The first column is the values for the European Union, for the global economy of the European Union 27, okay. In 2020, we can observe this is the evolution, the growth with respect to the previous quarter in real terms. Okay, we can observe a decrease of minus 7.8 for the first quarter the first quarter 2020. The fall is even sharper in the second quarter, and there is a very relatively important moderate recovery in the third quarter. Okay, this also occurs for the rest of the countries, especially in Germany. There is the recovery with respect to the previous quarter is remarkable. In Spain, the recovery is for close to 5%. Yesterday, the Spanish Minister of of economy told to the mass media that the recovery will be around the 10%. It's not so clear to me. And for the rest of the countries, you have here 1.5 for France and 3.5 for Italy, and for the Netherlands, 2.1. Okay. In this case, in the Netherlands, please take into account that it achieved the lowest decrease in the second quarter 2020. If we take into account the GDP, the annual growth GDP in real terms, the previous results implies that the decrease of the contraction in the third quarter 2020 is close to -12% in the European Union, and this value is lower. Is greater, excuse me, the contraction is lower for Germany and especially for the Netherlands, but for Spain, France, and Italy, the contraction is higher than expected. Okay, these are the estimation I have at this moment, taking into account these indicators, which I insist, these are not based on real data. They are just based on the experts' opinion. Okay. So, if we take into account that the European Commission predict that the European economy will contract around 8.3 in 2020, taking our prediction, this goal will only achieve whenever the European economy will grow at 10% with respect to the previous quarter in the fourth quarter of 2020. Okay, this is a quite improbable scenario. Okay, if we assume a much more probable scenario in which the evolution of the European economy grows in a similar way than in the precedent quarter, 3.41, then the contraction will be similar, will be around 10% in 2020. This value is for the whole year. Okay, so the contraction is going to be sharper than expected. So I think that the European Commission will have to revisit these estimations in the near future. Okay, however, as expected too, the behavior of the countries is not similar, and there is a very clear asymmetries. For instance, Germany and Netherlands will have a growth rate around 5%, okay, contraction of 5%. By contrast, Spain may even triplicate this figure. Okay, so these are the data I have at this moment. At the moment, I have more data, real data. I can revisit my estimation too. Okay, so I'm sorry, but the news I have to you are not so good as you could expect. Okay, thank you very much.
You are very welcome, Antonio. It's important to have I don't know if say the reality, but probably scenario with us, and we need to be prepared. So anyway, those are not the best news, but it's what we have or what we could have, and with that information, we can be better prepared. Thank you very much.
Antonio, let me tell you too that this prediction can be also translated in the evolution of the labor market. Okay, and I could expect a poorer evolution of the labor market, and I think that at the end of the 2020, the unemployment rate in the whole European Union will be close to the 9%. Okay, a very high value in comparison with the previous one. Even in Spain, we will have a very bad behavior of the labor market as expected due to the contraction. Okay, and more consequences of this value because the deficit, public deficit will increase, and etc. etc. Well, that's all.
Thank you, Antonio. I probably we will come back to you also in the next next minutes. So I am sharing now with you from the European Commission official web the evolution of the notification of cases at the European level during the past 2 weeks. And as you probably know, the situation is not very good, or is quite bad in Spain, Romania, okay, and not so serious in the rest. But the last news is that the notification are increasing, sorry, in France and other countries. So but we don't know what will be the evolution of the contagious during the next weeks or months. Okay, it seems that the health system is ready to. We don't expect to have a serious problem with the health system, but we need to be aware of the situation and follow it. Okay. Anyway, during the preparation of this return for our alliance against coronavirus, we thought that the main focus should be the recovery process for our economy and also for our society. Speaking, for example, of the problem that we will have with the unemployment. Okay, so we have prepared program for September where we will cover both the industrial ecosystem perspective, okay, and we will go through the 14 industrial ecosystems. We are inviting responsible from the European Commission just to let them explain us what is the approach for every one of those industrial ecosystems to better understand what they have in their mind, okay, in the definition of every one of them. But also we will have the cluster perspective, okay, which cluster or one representation of the clusters that are working on every one of those industrial ecosystems. The proposal is to not so much as before, not so much analyze the problems in the value chains or the problems in the supply chains. I think that this is not the moment for it, but to look for best practice on how clusters can help to develop, to grow those industrial ecosystems, and not only best practice, but also which kind of policy instruments can be applied, which kind of references we have on regional or national or European authorities implementing policy instruments that are well fitted for this purpose. Okay, and so this is the focus that we propose for the next sessions, and I am sure that Marek I will give later some minutes for Marek, but and he will explain better than me. Okay, but this is the main idea. We will have a review of the 14 ecosystem. We will dedicate also 3 sessions to the different the different governments across Europe that will speak about how clusters are being included in the national recovery plans. And tomorrow we expect to have Poland and probably somebody from Spain speaking about that. Okay. And as Ula told you before, we will focus also this month on the smart specialization strategies. And we have a specific week, next week, totally focused on that. okay, and with I need to say with a very high level of speakers and participants. In fact, we will start speaking about smart specialization strategies this Friday, because the session will be dedicated to the partnership of industrial modernization platforms. That is part of it, okay? So again, we will look for the European priorities for those three and how clusters can be key in the achievement of those of the goals that derived from the priorities. Let me show you with a higher focus the different topics for next week, okay? And this is the main proposal for this month. Marek, would you comment on what I have just said? The approach for the analysis for every day?
Yes, hi Antonio, good morning everyone. I'm happy to be again here, and we start indeed in September with particularly focus on recovery plans and smart specialization. And the reason is very simple. As already indicated by Ula in presentation, we have like 3 levels of investment, and I put in the chat some 3 links. I think it's good to start off. Coming back to the forecast, Antonio, if you can give me for 5 minutes the access to screen.
For
sure.
Let me look for you, sorry.
It's just
now.
Yeah, okay. Sure, I will. Yeah, so let's start with this one. Complementing what was done, what was said about economic situation, we see the economic forecast that was published by the Commission in July. You see different impact of COVID on different countries, particularly hit Italy, Spain, France, Spain, and Portugal. This will have the contraction of up to minus 12% in our economic forecast. At the same time, we have this COVID situation, which is still growing and not stable. Europe theoretically looks quite relatively in the global scale not bad, yeah, particularly in terms of deaths. In comparison with other parts in Asia and America, Europe is not bad. However, the situation is not stable, and as already shown by Antonio, the countries are unequally hit. And then in all the circumstances with COVID, with need for recovery, we have the MFF negotiations financial framework, where we have the recovery point. So the third link is exactly about what the Council proposed in September. In October, the Parliament is going to hopefully adopt it very quickly, and we will have this framework in December. But all the countries are submitting, starting with the mid-October recovery plan. So we will have this framework where we have at this very moment negotiations of at the regional level of operational programs to spend structural funds in cohesion. This is lots of money because it's for smart specialization definitely about 100 billion euro across. So this is the moment where the national authorities and regional authorities negotiate with with the European Commission the operational programs. At the same time, we have the situation in with the national level, where we have the recovery and resilience facility to to be prepared and starting to be submitted to the Commission. And for this document, I encourage you, if you are interested to detailed instruments, to go through this document. And on page 6 there is the details of spending. Sorry, going for so quickly, but I think I will encourage you to see exactly where and what are instruments at EU level planned. So we have regional level, we have national level, and then we have the EU level with direct management in Horizon Europe or European Single Market or Recovery and Resilience Facility. So we are right now in this framework, and now the question is where the clusters can be used and how they can be used, and what instruments could be best fit for using clusters, but as well the clusters participate in designing for example, smart specialization strategies or recovery plans. That's why we want to have this semester very particularly on this industrial ecosystems one by one, where we take concrete clusters which are most relevant for the industrial ecosystems and find out together where and what kind of instruments can be used for particular industrial ecosystem, be it construction, be it mobility. This is what we want to go through, and the week next week actually we want to as well to liaise very closely with the regional authorities, public authorities, and national authorities, so that they are aware that clusters are very good, not only a useful tool, but as well a very good partner in order to facilitate the instruments that they are going to implement in order to increase their recovery and the economic impact. So having said so, I think we are encouraging you to join our sessions. Antonio, glad that we are continuing this for the month of September, so that after this month, combining with our expert group, combining with our cluster conference, we are quite well fit for purpose of the recovery with cluster community, which is used for helping public authorities, their economies at local and regional and EU level to recover from this COVID. So thank you, Antonio, for this, and see you soon later for the whole month. Thank you.
You are very, very welcome, Marek. As you can see in the slides now, we say that these sessions are organized together with the European Commission, with the team, ULA's team, and Marek is key on the organization of all these sessions. Thank you. Eurada also is collaborating strongly, specifically on the organization of the next week sessions. And we also want to say thank you to the European Cluster Collaboration Platform that is giving us support in the communication and other aspects. So now the floor is open for questions. I need to say hello to a lot of people. I could not say individual names, but I am really glad to see a lot of, I will say, old friends here. All I feel all friends. Okay, all during this all these past months. So welcome, and we have 10 minutes for questions and comments. Who is the first?
Okay. Yes, Antonio?
Welcome.
Yes, okay. One very single question to Lula. How do you think you could involve the clusters from other areas of the world, like American, Asia, in this new agenda that you are going to have for the clusters?
Thanks, Jaime. So first of all, we talk about European recovery, and it is about the budget that goes to the member states and how the member states are using it and how we can place clusters within this recovery plans. But of course, you're perfectly right that we are not living in isolation and that internationalization of our activities is a very important economic factor, and all the trade related issues are very important, and that's why we ourselves on the European level, we are having the European strategic cluster partnerships for internationalization, which are going on for many years already, and let's say we're at the basis of the ideas of all the other strategic cluster partnerships, because these ones could prove that what they are doing is successful. So we are continuing for this, and my colleagues are will be issuing another call for cluster internationalization still this year. It's in the finalization phase, but also on other internationalization aspects. For example, we had together with two countries, Brazil and Mexico, we have done the low carbon business partnerships, where we really looked to bring European technology and companies to these countries and help them with a soft landing on technical assistance and also some financial aspects to prepare business in these countries. And we think this was also very successful, and we have the indicators on how much tons of CO2 we could save, etc. So we want to repeat it. We want to roll out next year in more countries, including Canada, but also Chile and Colombia, these low carbon business partnerships. And we are likewise looking to Africa. How can we help, for example, also with Africa, with the cluster development, but while immediately starting with a green technology, with a clean tech. So we see particularly the internationalization in the clean tech area as something we want to push and we are working on. And we think also for the recovery money, all the digital and green transition is of course key. And if we can build this also to help internationalization and bringing our business to other parts of the world, that would be important.
Thank you, La. So, next question. Who is the next? Don't be shy.
Good morning, everyone. Glad to be back. Aurora speaking. Thank you all for your presentations. I was very curious about the data and behavior of countries shown by Antonio Montañez. And my curiosity is that I've already heard and the news show that the evolution of the virus in the different countries is being different. Some countries are on the rebound, some are still on the first level of crisis. And as far as I understand, the countries that behaved better on the first phase, especially the eastern part of Europe, are now suffering more crises. Can we have the idea of the economic behavior of those countries compared with the western part of Europe? Thank you.
That's for you, Antonio.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I have the data if you want, but I have not analyzed okay, I can do it some minutes, and if you pass me an email, I can reply to you because I have the data, I have the economic indicators, but I have no idea which is the behavior because I prefer focus on the behavior of the global economy and the five major economies, excluding UK.
Thank you.
The
I don't need them for me, Antonio. You don't have to have that work. Of course, I can give you my contacts, but it's not that I need the data for me. But I think we can learn with the different experiences, and also the Eastern countries can learn from the ones that had already suffered the first phase and then are falling on the rebound. Sorry.
No, you're welcome. You're absolutely welcome.
I'm really glad to hear you again, Aurora. Welcome. Okay, good question. The next one. We have 4 minutes. Or comments, you know that you don't need to make questions. You can comment on what we have presented you. Martin, will you comment?
Yeah, I comment. It's fantastic. Thanks again, Antonio, and also for the insightful sessions. Trying to formulate the key takeaway. What I take out of today's session is that it's very important for clusters to reach out and to connect to other communities, as Ula said right at the start. And today we talk particularly, I think, about policymakers, those in charge of making all those policies, not only the recovery plans, but also the big structural funds plans, the just transition plans, and what else. And of course, also the knowledge providers and the academics, which are so important in the smart specialization strategies. So just a message from the ECCP, and Ulla mentioned that already. The good news is that the new ECCP website will come to you indeed next Monday. And also good news is that, let's say, the new ECCP will allow you to communicate exactly with those communities. So really policymakers as well as knowledge providers, as well as quite a few other communities. So I think we've been working very hard over the summer to make that happen so that that dialogue, as you build it up, can also be structured and that it's possible also in a structured way to reach out to those policymakers once everybody has filled in their profiles. And that is, of course, one message also, and I'll repeat it also over the days to come. It is important that all those part of the ECCP already having a profile will need to fill in a more detailed profile so that indeed better matchmaking can take place. So thank you for that opportunity and great to be back as well.
That's excellent, Jan Martin, and congratulations. We are looking forward for seeing the new functionalities of the ECCP next Monday, as you say. So I'm sure that we will have time to comment on it during this morning session. Thank you. Any other last comment?
Good morning, everyone. Hervé Floch speaking. So first of all, I'm sorry I got connected a bit late, so I could not, have all the information from Antonio Montaignes, and I'm sorry about that. But the presentation, at least the part I listened was really interesting, and I have, I would say, yes, a question for Hula. In Europe, most, if not all, the member states have a recovery plan, which is under preparation. And in France, for example, it should be officially announced this week on Thursday, as far as I remember. I have no doubt that cluster will definitely play a key role to facilitate, the deployment of that recovery plan, and especially the innovation will be a very strong engine to stimulate the rebound, economic rebound. I was just curious to know from you, Hula, and other attendees, of course, but if it would be possible to have on a virtual mode what we used to call the sort of European cluster forum, you remember, Hula, maybe having on a virtual meeting attendees, as it was mentioned just before by ECCP, policymakers, maybe a national cluster organization representative, EC, because my concern is always, okay, we will have a significant amount of money, but how this money for innovation at least could, you know, go to the cluster, European cluster community. That's always a tricky, you know, important question. So would it be reasonable to think about having such a meeting with policymakers, cluster actors, national level, regional levels? Just a suggestion. I may be wrong, but who cares?
Hervé, no, a very good point, and I think what you are proposing is really needed, but it is very much needed on one hand on regional and on national level. On European level, we have the European Cluster Expert Group, which we will also use for this, and we will have dedicated webinars for this. But I think what is even more important, and as you quite rightly said, France is bringing out its recovery plan. But then my question is then also, how are you organizing it in France? You have two different cluster organizations. So what are you doing then in setting up meetings with your French policymakers to make sure that the clusters are having the place in the recovery plans? And I think if you manage, because I know you are a strong organization and you are very well linked with your government, if you find a way to convince the government, and if you find arguments which the government is using, then it would be also very beneficial if you could share this with the rest, for example, also of the other cluster organizations, and the same, of course, goes likewise, Antonio, for Spain, if you manage to do it in Spain. And I think part of what we are doing here in the month of September is exactly that. Those of you who got through to your policymakers, share it with the others, that they can use, depending on their situation, the similar thing. And also we trying to share the arguments we are using in the house here with the different DGs. So I think it is really this month where we have to help each other, where we have to work together to find the right arguments to be in the recovery plans. I think for me, this is the highest priority this month and the coming months, because the finalization of the recovery plans should be submitted to the Commission in the beginning of next year. That's why now, and also the cluster conference we have in Berlin, are important moments that we work on what can we do, not only on a European level, also on the national level, because as the money will be going directly to the member states, we need to find ways there.
Thank you, Hula. It was very clear. It's always a bit difficult, as you know, since we have different initiatives at national levels. Sometimes it seems to be quite tough to have information going at the European level, and sometimes it seems relevant to work at the European level to stimulate the national level to do something and to engage, you see. So that's why I'm not, to be very honest. Also, we have a fairly, you know, relevant organization, good linkage with the government for innovation, and nevertheless, it's always kind of uncomfortable to be successful, to have the national representative who says, okay, we will share with other member states what we plan to do as a recipe, and then from the EU level, it's also not easy because EU cannot ask directly, I would say, or oblige, member states to share, to present the information on this. But for sure, AFPC for France, we will do our best to convince, to encourage our government or national representative to go for it, because the recovery plan, as you know, will be officially announced this week. And we have 15 billion euro for innovation. And I would be very curious to know which amount could benefit to cluster organization for accelerating innovation, in SMEs in particular. So that's something we have in front of us, and some energy and work to spend. Thank you again, Hula, and Antonio, of course, for what you do every day. Congrats.
But you were totally right. That's critical, Hervé, and we need to share. We need to share what we are doing and what kind of measure and procedures and programs, policies are being taken in the different countries, just to copy in the best sense possible those best references. So this is precisely the topic for tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have one session on cluster on the national recovery plans. We expect to have Poland and Spain, and it will be wonderful. In Sunday we could have somebody from France speaking out what they are doing with clusters. Okay, so this is the proposal for this month. You are invited to join us every day, but also please forward this information, these invitations to your network. Okay, that will be important to spread the knowledge of these sessions and to have more people participating and creating this collective intelligence exercise. Thank you, Ula. Thank you, Marek. Thank you, Antonio Montañez. Thank you, every one of you. And please join us and contribute during the next month. Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.